Thank you. Thank you. Folks, an unabashed capitalist.
I mean, that's a perfect place to start this conversation, actually, especially here at the Reagan Museum. It's an honor and a privilege to be sitting down with you, Jamie. There's a lot to get to in this conversation. So I figured we'd start small, and then I would ask you a really basic, straightforward question, and that is, what's your biggest worry right now?
Yeah. So first of all, thrilled to be here. I'm glad you're doing this. I hope we may join the defense forum you guys do every year, too. And the way I look at it, the big picture is the tectonic plates are shifting. We got to get our heads wrapped around that. Those tectonic plates are the geopolitics with these terrible wars, terrible proxy terrorist activity around the world, North Korea, the potential proliferation of nuclear weapons over time, which is the greatest threat to mankind. And then you have the other tectonic shift is the global economy. So the global military umbrella of America, and then the global economy, of which trade is a part. You know, the other parts are do people want to partner with you? Do you have your alliances? Do you have investment agreements? And all those various things, and they're changing. And then our debt, which you just heard a bunch of folks talk about eloquently, it's large, and it's not just us. We added $10 trillion in 5 years. We have, you had Reagan up there talking about deficits. The debt to GDP was 35%, and the deficit was 3.5%. Today, it's 100% debt to GDP net, and a deficit of almost 7%, highest peacetime ever. And when the CBO does their numbers, which I don't really trust, by the way, they should do the stress test. Like, what happens if we go into a recession? That 7% will be 10%. And so we have problems, and we got to deal with them. And then the biggest one, underlying both that, is the enemy within. I'm not as worried about China. China is a potential adversary. They're doing a lot of things well. They have a lot of problems. What I really worry about is us. Can we get our own act together, our own values, our own capability, our own management? What you heard today on stage was the amount of mismanagement is extraordinary, by state, by city, for pensions, and that stuff is going to kill us. And I always get asked this question: are we going to be the reserve currency? And no, if we are not the preeminent military and the preeminent economy in 40 years, we will not be the reserve currency. That's a fact. Just read history. Now I think we will be. Warren Buffett here would tell you we're enormously resilient. I agree with that. I think this time is different. This time we have to get our act together, and we have to do it very quickly.
That was a big answer. There's a lot to dig into there. So the takeaway is geopolitics.
I have a great
right?
quote for the first thing, too. Someone said, the government spends like a drunken sailor, and someone else said, no, a drunken sailor spends his own money. I forgot who said that one.
So you're talking about a total realignment of the global order. We're talking about a restructuring and simultaneous reassertion of American hegemony in the middle of all this. Huge gamble afoot right now with some of the policies that are coming out and how they're taking shape. What does it take for it to pay off? Just a list of stuff. Okay, we have to acknowledge the grievances that have put us in this position to start with, and they're real. Okay, immigration. What the hell were we doing? The bottom 20% of our population, their wages didn't go up for 20 years. They're dying 7 years younger. When administrations, the Biden administration is giving all this money to EVs and cars and wasting a lot of money on green stuff, which isn't going to work, and all that. Do you think people in rural cities, do you think people in inner cities thought they were getting anything? Do you think that those people think that the American government is fair and competent and that this was in their best interest? Their schools don't work. They're not getting the skills they need, and you heard that just now. So we got to acknowledge these. And I also call it blue tape, because Republicans, you generally don't like red tape. You understand the devastation of it, but most Democrats, they love it. They want more of it, and they want to make it so confusing you can't even meet the rules, so you get punished and fined afterwards. And so. And then you have it in permitting, and I call the government the Leviathan that's too weak, can't get stuff done, and too strong. It imposes things on the American public that they're getting sick of, and they should be getting sick of it. And acknowledge that, celebrate our virtues: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, equal opportunity, family, God, country. And you can acknowledge the flaws that we have, which are extraordinary, what we did to the black population for years. Don't denigrate the great things of this country, because those are two different things. If you have in any team, if you put a team on the field and the team's torn apart, they're going to lose. And that's kind of us right now. You know, we're not a team anymore, and we don't collaborate, we don't talk that much to each other. Deal with our policies, and this is the enemy within. We've got to fix our permitting, our regulations, our immigration, our taxation, which I think they're on their way. We have to fix our inner city schools, our healthcare system. If we fix those things, we can grow 3% a year, and all these problems will disappear. But the most important is maintain those military alliances, spend whatever you got to spend to have the strongest military in the world, and I think the goal, I'm hoping the goal of the Trump administration is this: keep the Western military alliances together. If the world cannot rely on America's military umbrella, we may have paid too much, we have not done it. If the world can't rely on it, they are going to be looking for alternatives. There's only one other real alternative out there, or getting a nuclear weapon. And then maintain and expand and grow our economic alliance. We have tons of treaties, economic treaties. We do a terrible job in development finance, but expand that. The goal, beating up Europe, the goal should be help Europe get stronger. We know what their problems are. Keep them closer. Do the trade agreements and the investment agreements. They'll keep the Western world together. Those two things will keep the world safe and free for democracy. If we don't do those things, the world is not safe and free for democracy. And so that's what we have to do. And people know what they are. We've all written about it. We just have failed to actually do it.
So tariffs are obviously in the mix right now, but we also know that a number of countries, the game plan here is to get to trade deals. How do you think that shakes out? Do you think this ultimately, maybe looking to the end of this year or the end of this term for this president, that we actually end up in closer alliances with some of our trading partners than we had?
We did a little bit of too much everything everywhere all at once, so it's hard to step back from that and finish. I think the best we can hope for, and we should hope for, and I think I see them doing this, which is to finish, maybe there's 15 important ones, finish them. There'll be agreements in principle. They will not be trade agreements, but agreements in principle at least give you a framework to get things done, and hopefully they could do some in July, August, September, October, November. I would engage with China. I just got back from China last week. They're not scared, folks. This notion they're going to come bow to America, I wouldn't count on that. And when they have a problem, they put 100,000 engineers on it, and they've been preparing for this for years. But we should engage. And when we do these trade agreements, the most important part is not, making TVs or making furniture or T-shirts or sneakers, stuff like that. It should be the stuff that relates to national security. Okay, that's rare earths, medical, pharmaceutical ingredients, penicillin, and it's things which closely relate to national security. Maybe AI, narrowly done. The chips you hear reading about. And then things which I think are very unfair trade, where they might be using merciless behavior to dominate global industries. That is the stuff of war, by the way. If you read all history, that is what started it. And that might be cars, batteries, solar panels, stuff like that. That we should do with their allies. It's not going to do America a great job if we come and hold it off, but we don't stop them, beggaring thy neighbor or beggaring Europe. So we have to be we should be doing some of that with their allies.
What you're getting at is
and our allies need our help, by the way. They know they need to do some of these things, and some of them won't be able to do it without us.
There's this expanding intersection between industrial policy in this country and national security, which sort of gets at what you're talking about with some of these different industries. And it's spanning the last couple of administrations. Everybody dabbles in the details in terms of how the policies shake out across administrations. But I guess to that point, do we need to rethink what constitutes national security?
I wouldn't rethink it. We know what constitutes national security. We need, I was saying we shouldn't be stockpiling Bitcoin. We should be stockpiling guns, bullets, tanks, planes, drones, rare earths. We know what we need to do. This is not a mystery.
Did you say stockpiling Bitcoin?
I said we shouldn't be stockpiling Bitcoin.
Oh, it shouldn't be. Okay.
We should be stockpiling bullets.
Okay.
The military guys tell you that, if there's a war in the South China Sea, we have missiles for 7 days. Okay, come on. I mean, we can't say that with a straight face and think that's okay. So we know what to do. We just got to now go about doing it. Get the people together, roll up our sleeves, have the debates, do some privately, do some publicly. JPMorgan is going to publish we call it the Defense Action Form, something that shows we don't leave excess surplus production capability for missiles or bullets or bombs. We don't have a military that can flexibly move money from, you see how quickly the software and hardware they need changes. So the military can't have a 30-year program. They've got to be able to cancel that drone program, build up that drone program, hire this person to do the software. We have to allow them to do multi-year budgeting. We essentially don't. The military tells me it costs them $50 billion a year, and we have to spend more. I mean, so I can go on and on and on. We're going to lay out all these things and hopefully help, just get going there. I think they know, by the way. I think all of us in this room know about this. It's just now we have to do it.
When you talk about spending more, a lot of focus on the big, beautiful
I'll
bill.
add one other thing because it is important. I know, Jason, you've done, I don't know if he's in the room, has done a great job getting this one big bill through. The American people, okay, they know that when they see money going to Washington, D.C., and you could be a Democrat or Republican, my most liberal elite Democrats, I always ask them, do you personally believe that sending another $1 trillion down to D.C. is going to make the country better? Do you think it's going to be used for good stuff, or is it just going to go to the interest groups? But my criticism, and they don't, by the way, almost no one believes that, my criticism is there are 13,000 lobbying groups in D.C. There's only like 10 or 12 bank ones, by the way. People think banks are big. We're not actually that big. Now you have private equities bigger or stuff. And yes, we absolutely should be, I don't know if Gary's here, taxing carried interest and all that. And nor should we allow much SALT deductions, even though it costs me a lot of money. But those groups are so selfish. Cotton, corn, sugar. And when they go to D.C., they're fighting for interest groups, unions, teachers, and it's really damaging our country. So you need leadership like a Ronald Reagan type. They have to explain to the American public why you have to sacrifice your own personal interest. And if you do, by the way, and we can grow at 3%, you'll still be far better off. So, to me, it's okay to sacrifice a little bit and to get all these groups. And all these groups, a lot of CEOs, they don't even know what their people are asking for in D.C. And their people are going to see people like Gary Cohn every day begging, for a little special thing here, a special thing here, why this should not be discontinued. The government should get rid of all that crap. The American business community doesn't need any special tax breaks at all. They should have rules of the road, good regulations, and let the world compete. And so there's a lot to do. We know what to do. It has been done before. It's just going to be hard.
So how do you see, I guess, what is your takeaway then on this tax bill as it makes its way through Congress right now? Because on the one hand, looks like it increases the debt load. On the other hand, there are stimulative aspects to it as well.
Yeah, so our debt to GDP is 100%. It's going to grow to about 115% over the next 10 years or something like that. Then it's a hockey stick. And the hockey stick is Medicare and Medicaid, maybe a little bit of Social Security. So we see that train coming down the tracks. We know how bad it is. But my view is get the tax bill done. You heard the folks on stage, certainty, business growth, and then focus on other things that grow the economy, permitting, red tape reform, all stuff like that, education, skills, which are all doable. There are a lot of places that do quite a good job at this. Read Our Towns. Jim Fallows writes for Atlantic. He's got this book, Our Towns. You go to Omaha and St. Louis and Bozeman and Austin, and they're innovating, they're growing, they're collaborating. Small D works. It's big D that's failed. And I put California in the big D state, the big D category too, by the way. And so we know what things to do, and we just got to get people to do them, and it works locally. There are schools locally that do a great job training kids in cyber. A teller can make $45,000 or $50,000 a year with full medical, dental, Pilates, massages. We take care of our people, and then the jobs go up, and we have to stop denigrating jobs. Oh, and I don't know if Paul Ryan's in the room. I would double the earned income tax credit. I would take that individual who's making $14,000 a year, and they now get a tax credit if they have 2 children of $6,000. If they have no children, they get $600. I would give them $12,000, whether or not they have children. Okay, that money, it would cost about $60 billion, would go directly into their communities, directly to help their families, directly to help their homes, and I would pay for that by getting rid of carried interest. Take it from those rich. And so and if we don't do these things, we're going to continue to have a problem. And I think that'll grow the economy too. There's no question they would spend the money. It has the virtue of bringing people into the workforce. People who work, less recidivism, less crime, more household formation, less depression, less suicide, and that first rung in the ladder leads to the second rung, and pride. And we have to get back to that and not denigrate any job. All jobs are good.
I want to go back to this notion of
Even
cost.
journalism.
we have our place. I want to go back to this idea, this notion of government efficiency and cost cutting and tackling spending by the government. Today's Elon Musk's last day working with the government. Is Doge and the efforts of Doge at risk here?
In my, when they started that, should the government try to be more efficient? Well, of course they should. Should the people doing that follow the law? Well, of course they should. So people make it Doge, not Doge. So, and then I think Ronald Reagan had an effort like Doge, and Bill Clinton actually did have a surplus and did cut a lot of stuff. Absolutely. But my view is, running a big company, if I set up a group at the top, and then, I tell you, oh, be more efficient, that doesn't work particularly well. If I meet you each individually, I ask you who your CFO is, who your this is, who your that is, come back, report to me what you're doing, your head count, that'll work. And so, yeah, they should do it, but that's what the OMB supposedly is for. And so I would embed it in every department. Chris, thank you for being here. You have 40 departments? I mean, I don't even know. I would have every department that takes money from the American people should publish a short, understandable annual report at the end of the year. You gave me so much billions, I told you I was going to do, and here's what I did. Every one of them. And these programs never die, there's death taxes and the thing that never dies, which is a government program. So yeah, we need to be more efficient. And the government has to demonstrate its competency. If government doesn't demonstrate its competency, the underpinning of being a civil citizen doesn't work. They think we're stealing their money.
Going back to the Reagan years, you think bond vigilantes are back?
Yeah. These are very large numbers. You've seen it a little bit. You had the crack in the bond market in COVID a little bit. The government did the right stuff, then they massively overdid both spending and QE. We borrowed and spent $10 trillion from 2020 to today. Okay, and you heard the numbers before. We also bought $4 trillion of your securities, on top of the $4 trillion we bought in the first go-round. Those numbers are true globally, not quite as big as ours, but the QE of us was $8 trillion, the QE of the rest of the world was another $8 trillion or something like that. You're talking about huge sums of money. We don't really know the full effect of that. And the bond dealers, which Gary mentioned, inventories are much smaller than they used to be, partially because of rules and regulations. And you are going to see a crack in the bond market, okay? It is going to happen. And I tell this to my regulators, some of who are in this room, I'm telling you it's going to happen, and you're going to panic. I'm not going to panic. We'll be fine. We'll probably make more money, and then some of my friends will tell me that we like crises because it's good for JPMorgan Chase. Not really. I tell people when Credit Suisse went bankrupt at the First Republic, it was terrible for the banking industry. I think we can make everything better, including that, by just changing and modifying certain rules and regulations, letting market makers intermediate more in the market. But to give you a number, like just JPMorgan alone buys and sells $3 trillion a day. And we move $10 trillion a day of money. And we're probably a tenth. So the money moving around the world is $100 trillion a day. The money moving around in the investments, this is stocks, bonds, corporate governments, derivatives, credit, you name it, FX, sovereign debt around the world, 30 trillion. The people who set those long-term rates are those people, including you in the room. It's not the Federal Reserve. They can try to manipulate the long-term rate. They can do what's it called? They do the twist or whatever. It doesn't work for that long. So if you look at economic history, bad things happen. When those tectonic plates shift, it's very hard to see in real time. It is shifting, and this is one of them. I just don't know if it's going to be a crisis in 6 months or 6 years. And I'm hoping that we change both the trajectory of the debt and the ability of market makers to make markets. And also remember, there are a lot of people, going down to Washington who actually like bad markets. And the problem with the bad markets isn't that it's bad for the big banks who make markets. It's bad for the people who raise money, small businesses, asset-backed securities, middle market companies, corporations, the United States government. And that volatility scares people. And then also it happened, markets closed. And you saw that happen multiple times in the last 12 years where you couldn't sell a high yield bond. If you're going to sell a lot of treasuries, you could have had a little bit of issue. So yeah, it's coming. It's just part of all the stuff we talked about. And unfortunately, it may be that we need that to wake us up. It's an unfortunate thing. So.
We do have some Fed officials in the room, so I do want to touch on the Federal Reserve here, because the message has seemed to be We're going to be patient. We're not going to let politics sway our decision and policy, and we can afford to be patient here, given all of the uncertainty with tariffs and the fact that the economy, while slowing, does still seem to be holding up somewhat. That seemed to be the message yesterday, too, coming from the Federal Reserve with the release we got on the heels of Fed Chair Powell meeting with President Trump. Is the Fed right to give time here?
Yes. You know, the Fed has a tough job, okay? And I have enormous respect for Jay Powell and a lot of the other Fed folks. But they're not, you know, you hear we say the Fed sets short-term rates. We always say that, right? The Fed sets and they actually do set short-term rates. But what happened when inflation went up? They followed. Are they really in charge? I just told you $30 trillion a day. They're not really in charge. They're trying to navigate it so that we have the best possible economy. And so they were late raising rates. You know, they also told all the banks in the world that interest rates aren't going to go up to, you know, won't go higher than 2% when they have these ridiculous stress tests we have to go through, you know, which are a complete waste of time. You know, we do 100 stress tests a week. You think I care about that one? And I knew that rates weren't going to stay at 2%. So we were quite prepared for rates going to 5%. Then they caught up. And now they have to wait and see because it's, you know, it's hard to tell what the effect of, you know, is the economy slowing? I don't know. Is it soft landing? I don't know. The other thing I should have mentioned about as we enter this environment, asset prices are still high. That would be very different if asset prices were still low.
That surprised you?
A little bit, yeah. But I mentioned how much money's been thrown out there. So, you know, when you do that kind of giving money to the American citizens through QE or fiscal, money is like water filling every crack. Some of you bought stuff, some of you saved stuff, some of you went into venture capital, some of you went private credit, some of you bought a Rolls Royce, but it fills the cracks, but it definitely lifts up asset prices. And so, you know, there'll be a reversal of that at one point. You know, asset prices come down, you know, that may cause some stress and strain for people. So they're right to wait now. We have, you know, I think inflation may be going up. I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff in the future, which is inflationary. So if you're the Fed, you can't just say, well, you know, what happened today to consumer prices? Which, by the way, if you dig into consumer prices, you would throw out the calculation. It's a lot of mud in there, okay? So it's kind of consistent, you know, month by month by month. But year over year, 3 years from now, what the adjustments they make, I'm not blaming them. It's hard to really tell. And you know, when you look at certain things like gas and milk and eggs and things like that. So, but the future. What I see is inflationary, which is huge fiscal deficits around the world. The whole world is remilitarizing. Infrastructure and green economy. We're going to waste a lot of money in the green economy, and we should do some of it, but it's going to cost a lot of money. Demographics may be inflationary. I don't see the deflationary stuff. Yes, AI may be that, but not next year. I mean, people are spending a lot of money in AI. And you see the projections of data center spending stuff. You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. And we have 600 AI use cases, and it's very efficient, very effective. But it's not going to be and technology is always deflationary. You know, it's kind of like a cosmological constant. And this one may be faster than we've ever experienced. That I think is possibly true.
You touched on permitting, the idea of deregulation, or at least cutting red tape. Can that help to offset that? Can
totally.
That be deflationary?
Deregulation, permitting. You know, getting rid of the cobwebs, the barnacles in the boat, absolutely. Permitting, you know, we can't get a gas pipeline from Appalachia into New York. We can't get a hydroelectric wire from Canada into Massachusetts. We can't build the grids we need. We can't, I mean, it is extraordinary. There's a mountain pass, which I know you're aware of it. I think it's called Mountain Pass Company. It's a railroad company. They've been waiting for 10 years to get permits. They can make rare earth, and they can make magnets in size today. They need a little bit of, you know, subsidy to do it because the Chinese will come in and just undercut. So if you're buying it, and you're going to say, well, I can't buy it from you because it's twice what it is over here. So we do have to have a little something to make up for that. But absolutely, dereg, pro-growth attitude, getting skills right, getting permitting right, not wasting money on fake things, all would accelerate growth. I think we could be growing at 3% a year. That's the other thing I would say. We should aspire to grow. You know, and you hear that, which I think is a very positive thing out of the administration today. We want to grow, and that if you had 3% growth, and you did all your CBO numbers, that's a dramatic difference. a dramatic difference in how much you collect in normal tax about raising them, and how people feel and their incomes are going up pretty dramatically.
We do have the SEC commissioner sitting in the room. What are you seeing in terms of the IPO pipeline and what it takes to go public? Are public markets broken? Because I've spoken to some investors who would make the argument that yes, they are.
You know, this is a great frustration of mine, and we've gone from, in 1996, we had 8,000 public companies. We now have 4,000. And I'm talking about operating companies. And that's apples to apples. There are a lot more of these REITs and investment companies. I'm talking about companies that make stuff, sell stuff, buy stuff, et cetera. And private equity, I'm not against private equity. It's gone from owning 1,000 to 25,000. And private credit has grown like this, and the mortgage business has left the banking business pretty much. All of that was all done, and this really irritated, without any forethought on the part of our regulators. Like zero. None, nada. Not one conversation about the effect of requirements of the capital, liquidity, or CCAR, what it's going to do in these markets. There are some good things about those markets. There's some bad things about those markets. I'm not against private credit, but the one that bothers me the most is, you know, we used to have a very active small business IPO thing. But if you're a small business, and you know, I'm talking about, you know, you make 100 million in profits and you might be worth, you know, $1.5 billion or something, the cost of registering, the litigation, the disclosure requirements, the cookie cutter board, instead of having a board of 5 with people you really like, who've been with you your whole life, you know, the registration requirements, the compensation requirements, the press, you know, loves to beat up companies. We need to create an active small market, and then we need to get rid of people like ISS and Glass Lewis. How they seeped into our system, they are like a, they are a cancer that, and it's snuck in, and I'm to blame for this too. I didn't realize it. I'm going back years ago that these guys, and who do they go to first? All the pension plans, CalPERS, CalSTRS, New York, all the do-gooders around the world. And then they started to use that to look at green stuff and comp stuff and social stuff. And we were filling out forms. And I've told people, I'm not filling out any more forms voluntarily. If you want to fill out a form voluntarily at JPMorgan Chase, you need my permission. And we were filling it out for this ESG thing and that ESG thing and this DEI thing and the ISS thing. And that thing seeped up. And now 30% of the votes, and the people lie. They automatically voted by ISS and Glass Lewis, which, by the way, violates their fiduciary responsibility. And when they say to me, well, we don't have the manpower, you have the manpower to read some proxies. It's not a big deal, you know. And so people should take more self-responsibility. We should change how we do no broker votes. We should change how people have to do it. And those people should be held to fire. They can say whatever they want, do whatever they want, put whatever numbers on. They have no requirement to be accurate. So Jay Clayton had passed something that's saying, you know, if a company disagrees with their numbers, they have to respond and stuff like that, but they have no liability. You got to bring that back, and then we can have active markets. There are, you know, one of the benefits about JPMorgan Chase is if you go to Sweden, they set up a small account. This is a great thing where, you know, you could put in not all the money you want, but up to millions of dollars. You pay 1% a year, no capital gains. You can take the money in and out at will. Their stock market is growing like this, and they made it much easier for small companies to register. Less disclosures, less requirements, more flexibility, and they've added hundreds of companies. So you guys should look around the world and say, what do we want to do? And we did this all thoughtlessly. And of course, some people think it's a good thing. My view is healthy public markets are probably better than having moved all that into private markets, but you know, we're going to find out.
I'm going to bring this back to the beginning of the conversation. I'm going to ask, what are you seeing? Because you have so many clients, small business, large business, global investors, consumers, and you have a global footprint. So what are you seeing and how are you counseling your clients? And is it different with those in the US versus those who are non-US, given this global realignment we find ourselves in?
Well, so the US, you know, Europe's done a pretty good job crippling itself. So the U.S. stock market's worth $60 trillion. I think Frankfurt is 3. You know, the UK is 3. Paris is 3. And that's gotten much worse over time. Their GDP per person has dropped. It used to be close to ours, and now it's 25-30% less. That's how important these things are for the people. And all these things I talk about, they hurt lower paid people more than anyone in this room. I mean, that's the amazing thing when you have these debates about policy. You hear this constant refrain, you're just talking your own book. I'm saying, no, we're talking the book of all of our citizens. You want to lift them up, change these policies. So I think if you are a company and you want to raise money in high yield, and the markets are wide open for certain types of IPOs and high yield, get the money. You just heard me talk about the moving tectonic plates. Markets sometimes will do what they have to do to screw the most people. You got to get prepared. Don't assume. And in credit markets in particular, and Gary, is Gary in the room? Do you know what the credit derivative spread is to guarantee American debt now is? It's 50 basis points or 45 basis points. It's the same as guaranteeing Italy or Greece. Okay? So the credit spreads could gap out dramatically. So if rates go up, so can credit spreads, and they're historically low. So, take advantage of that if you're going to need the money. So if there is some kind of crisis, down the road, you can handle it.
All right. Before we wrap this up, I do want to ask, almost two decades at the helm at JPMorgan, $4 trillion bank, one of the most successful CEOs of modern times. What are some of the lessons or advice that you would share with this room of policymakers and business leaders?
So get out, talk to people, talk to clients, I talk to everybody. I think our government should, Eisenhower had a lunch or dinner every week with the opposing side leadership, absolutely. You learn a lot, you learn to respect a lot, you learn to respect opposing views, you learn about complaints, you learn about competitors. Don't put your head in the sand, observe, and have all your people do it. And it's a never-ending process because we have competitors from around the world, and they're smart, and they're tough, and they're coming. Bureaucracy, I gave a speech recently with our own senior people, bureaucracy is extraordinary. If you look at companies, Sears, Kmart, digital equipment, Nokia phones, BlackBerry, they all went bankrupt, and so did half the financial companies in my short tenure, and it was almost always arrogance, greed, complacency, bureaucracy in almost all cases. And it just festered. People don't look at the number, they bullshit themselves about how they're making money or why they're making money, or, and then they had these political things, make the boss feel good, don't embarrass someone. When people say to me, they put a good foot forward, I always say, don't put a good foot forward, put the truth forward. 100% the truth, and tell us, then we'll deal with it, it's okay. And so a deep, honest assessment, I'd say you have to grit. You got to, like, every day, man, put your jersey on and just go with the fight. Get involved with governments and regulators. I see them just as regularly as I see anybody else. And I'm going to say humility and curiosity. People don't want to work for jerks. They don't want to work for people who blame them. They don't want to work for someone who can't get on a road trip. We do bus trips. We do trips around the world. And we go to the branches, and shake clients' hands and take a complaint or two. People want to know that you have a little heart, you have a little humility, you care a lot, and and when leaders, it's about them. People know, and that's a different kind of. Now, companies can do quite well at that because sometimes those people are quite capable for a while. They will not build a great company. That's a different issue. So. Anyway, I did a thing you can get on YouTube. We actually put it out there. It was 90 minutes about some of these learnings I've had in my life. I had a little fun doing it. But to put it on YouTube, we had to edit out the 30 minutes where I say things I shouldn't say. and I also went around the room and said, I don't mean to embarrass you, but I got to tell them this thing that you did that just, but I had to give real examples, because you don't give real examples, people don't understand it. And the real examples are just devastating and funny and hard to watch sometimes.
Final question for you. I'm not going to ask you a succession question. I know you hashed that out at your investor day last week.
I will have a successor one day, yes.
Yes. But I am going to ask you this before we get off the stage, and that is, what would it take, what would be the scenario that you would entertain to consider public service?
All right, ready? I'll tell you, if I thought I could really win. Which I don't think I could.
Jamie Dimon.
Guys, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good job. Good job.